What's up, everybody? It is the middle of December, so we're going to be talking about the Christmas story tonight. Have our Christmas party next week, so there may or may not be a video with that. There will be a Christmas message, but it'll be a little bit different. We finished our parables series last week. We're going to do this one off on the Christmas story this week called No Room, and then have our Christmas party next week, and then we're done for 2020 with Wednesday night youth group and stuff. So tonight is called No Room, and we're going to look at the Christmas story a little bit, and we're going to read a couple of passages, and then I'm going to go back before those passages and talk about some things that led up to those, and then use those passages as kind of our storyline of no room, of having no room for Jesus, or how do we respond to Jesus or whatever. So I'm going to start in Luke chapter 2 and read verses 15 through 20. When the angels had left them and returned to heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go straight to Bethlehem and see what has happened, which the Lord has made known to us." They hurried off and found both Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. After seeing them, they reported the message and all they were told about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary was treasuring all these things in her heart and meditating on them. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things which they had seen and heard, which were just as they had been told. And then over in Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes and the people, and asked them where the Christ would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. "And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. After they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he realized he had been outwitted by the wise men, flew into a rage and gave orders to massacre all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, in keeping with the time he had learned from the wise men. So this takes place after the actual birth, and we're going to kind of set it up with some things that happened that we didn't read from, that are familiar parts of the story but are so important to the story, but they're not what we actually read. Those are two of the responses that we're going to get to later in the night, later in the time together here. So to back up and talk about what actually happened, we need to start with this. God called two of the most unlikely people to carry out his plan. Mary and Joseph were very poor. They were very young. They were Jews in Roman culture, so they were despised. They were oppressed, and they lived in poverty. Scholars say they were probably teenagers, probably 15 to 19 years old, engaged or betrothed as it was in that culture. And they both received these angelic visions. These visions were told them that they were going to birth and raise the Messiah, the Son of God, Jesus. And they both struggled with this calling. Mary left for a few months to spend some time with a relative, her cousin Elizabeth. Joseph was troubled and wanted to put Mary away silently because it was a disturbing thing. It didn't make sense to him. Ultimately, they trusted God. Ultimately, they did what God asked them to do. They did what they were asked to do, and they carried the Messiah into the world. The circumstances surrounding the birth began with a Roman census. A Roman census forced them to travel at the worst possible time. The census was ordered by Caesar Augustus, who was the emperor at the time, and they were forced to travel while Mary was about 9 months pregnant. They were forced to travel to Bethlehem, which was about a 90-minute trek, 90-mile journey. So for us, it would be the equivalent of going to Harrison or Jacksonville or somewhere like that. That would take an hour and a half or 2 hours by car. By walking, it was a 4 or 5 day journey anyway, and factor in that she was that pregnant and about to pop with a baby. It's a long walk. It's an inconvenience. So it forced travel at the worst possible time. Jesus was born in an inconvenient environment. The birth city is not where they would have chosen. They were from Nazareth, Joseph of Nazareth. They would have chosen somewhere closer to home. But the census was used to tax the citizens, to see how many they had and to put taxes on them and to keep control of them. And it required travel to the birthplace of the man in the family. And this is a place that Joseph no longer lived and no longer had connections. It wasn't a place where he could call ahead and get reservations. It wasn't a place where there was a family member with an empty room. It wasn't a place with a hotel or an Airbnb with an extra room just waiting on them as they traveled to them. And so they were forced to go to Bethlehem, a place that they wouldn't have chosen, but a place that fulfilled ancient prophecy. Hundreds of years before, in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, it was said that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. So they had to go. This was part of God's plan from hundreds of years before. And they had to depend on finding something once they got there, a place to stay once they got there, on someone's hospitality. But it says they found no room. It says that there was no, no vacancies, no place for them to stay. So the birth location was not what they would have picked. We see our Christmas cards and our cute little pictures and all that kind of stuff of the manger scene, and it's peaceful and serene, and the shepherds are quietly worshiping, and the animals are quietly observing, and they're like pets, and it's all silent night and all that kind of stuff. It was not this majestic, immaculate, beautiful scene like we get from greeting cards and so forth. It was noisy. Animals, animal stuff, crying baby, stressed parents, no hospital, no nurse, no midwife, no family around for the birth. No technology like we have today to make it a lot easier. Just the husband, just a stable, just swaddling clothes, just a manger, which was like a feeding trough. No crib, no bassinet, no rocker. And the end would have been like a bed and breakfast. It would have been like a bed and breakfast with a family living there and then a guest room or whatever that they rented out. The guest room was obviously already taken here, but the man didn't want to turn them away. And so he gave them a place to stay. The stable was more like a cave-like structure, more than likely. He didn't want to turn them away, so he puts them in this cave-like structure attached to the house. Away from other people, yes, but not private because of the animals and all of what was going on. So there's all the stuff that leads up to what we just read. There's the background, the inconvenience of the situation and all of that kind of stuff, as it was still part of God's plan. And so for the rest of our time, I want us to talk about the idea of, do we have room for Jesus? Jesus was born into a rushed, hurried environment. That sounds familiar, right? It was unlike what they would have planned, what they would have chosen, what they would have wanted their baby to be born in. Parents spend all kinds of time getting ready, preparing. They'll do whatever it takes to prepare for the new baby. They'll read books, they'll go to classes, they'll get everything perfectly lined up in the nursery and all of that kind of stuff. Parents stress enough in normal circumstances with a newborn, especially their firstborn, and they'll do whatever it takes to provide for the arrival, to create space for that baby, to make it as smooth as possible. But in this particular situation, there was so much chaos and so much going on. Do we have room in our lives for Jesus this Christmas? Is our heart prepared? Is our heart ready for him? Or is it so cluttered with other stuff that we miss the majesty, the wonder, the awe of Jesus being born as a baby for us? Making room for Jesus means that we have to push other things aside. It means that we have to make space. And the question for us is, do we have room for him? Basically, in the Christmas story, there's 4 responses that we could have. Is he a threat to our comfort and status? That's how it was for Herod. Herod was troubled. He was the king of the Jews. He was a political giant. He was threatened when they came and said there was a baby going to be born that was going to be the king. He's a powerful ruler at the time of Jesus' birth. The wise men come. They ask him where the new king is going to be born. He's disturbed. And he sends them out to find where he's going to be born and says, report back to me so I can worship. He wasn't going to worship. He was going to kill him. He was going to get rid of this threat. They were warned, thankfully, not to return to Herod, and that ticked him off. Herod was really upset, and so he slaughtered. He decreed for all the babies 2 and under to be slaughtered. It's horrific. Genocide, infanticide. It's awful. He had no room for Jesus, and he tried to make sure that nobody else did either. Second thing, is he an obligation or a duty? The wise men saw him as worthy of a visit. These were astronomers and astrologers. They paid attention to the skies. They paid attention to the world. They looked for signs. They looked for some sort of hope, some sort of helpful sign. And they saw the star, and they left everything to follow that star to see the new king. They were men of means. They were very wealthy. They were very rich, and for several months they traveled to get to this place. Their gifts were expensive. That's how we know that they were men of means. They fit Jesus into their lives for a moment. They sacrificed and worshiped in the moment. But was it a long-term act, or was it just fulfilling an obligation? We don't know, and I'm not trying to say it was or wasn't. But for so many people in churches and youth groups, we attend by choice or by obligation, whichever one it is, but it's more of a duty. It's not a life-changing privilege. It's not something that lasts. It's an in-the-moment thing. It's an obligation and duty. Third thing, does he change your life? The shepherds in Luke chapter 2, they were low class. They were near the bottom of the social status. They were watching their flocks at night, and an angel comes to them. It scares them to death. But the angel says, I've got good news. I've got hope. And that message changed everything for them. The Messiah was born, and they were going to be the ones privileged to see him. Their lives were changed because of that encounter. How do we know that? Because they left glorifying and praising God, and other people were in awe of them. They could not return the same way that they were before. And our lives should be the same. If we've really encountered Jesus, it should be life-changing, life-altering. The fourth question, the fourth response, takes it even further than that. Does he become the focus and priority of our lives? For Mary and Joseph, everything revolved around Jesus. That's what it's like for parents. They changed their lifestyles. They changed their plans because of the child. They fed him. They changed him. They clothed him. They cleaned up after him. They rocked him to sleep. They cooed at him and made stupid baby noises at him and whatever else. All the things that parents do for a child. They were focused on Jesus. Are we focused on Jesus? Are we integrating him into our lives where he becomes the priority, the focus of our lives? Don't just fit him in. Don't just lean on him in hard times. Make room for him to have access and priority in your life all the time, in every way, throughout your life. The Christmas story. For some people, it's a cute story. It's a fun, once-a-year story, a great historical narrative maybe, a cute story with lots of songs and traditions and movies and whatever else. But it should be a lot more for those of us who claim Christ. It's something relevant for our lives now. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, where do you put Jesus? Is he a threat to your life, to your current lifestyle, to the way you're living now, to what you think you have now? Is he something that's a once-in-a-while visitor? Occasionally you give him the time of day to go to church or youth group, occasionally a few times a year or whatever, but he's not really a huge priority for your life. Or is he life-changing, all-encompassing focus and priority of your life? More than just making room for him, more than just fitting him in, more than just squeezing him into your life. Make him Lord of all. Where do you fall? The invitation for us, the invitation for you, is to take a step closer to Jesus today, to follow him in a greater dependence and commitment to him, to let him be fully integrated into your life right now for this Christmas and for life. He's the greatest gift ever. He's the greatest thing your life will ever have. Make room for him. Don't live your life as if there's no room for Jesus this Christmas.